Blessed are those who read aloud the words, even words like harlotry, words like vanity, words like exile, words like vision. Blessed are they who read aloud such words, and blessed are they who hear, and blessed are those who keep what is written therein. The therein about which John is writing our Bible. The Bible is a big book and an old book, thick and dense. It is an intimidating book to many, and it is a lifeline to others. Written over thousands of years, the earliest parts of it written not long after the invention of the alphabet. So imagine, if you will, early writers armed with alphabet and parchment. Imagine them taking ancient stories that circulated in oral tradition, circulated at night by the campfire. The story of creation, Adam and Eve, the serpent, Cain and Abel, the Tower of Babel, Noah and his ark. Imagine these early writers taking these stories that had been passed on generation to generation, passed on campfire to campfire to campfire, passed on family to family to family, to tribe, all across and up and down the great Rift Valley. Imagine these early writers taking these words and forming them into alphabet, and pouring the words onto parchment. Scrolls and scrolls of words and stories, and in the process, in the pouring of these words of alphabet onto parchment, the stories once fluid under the artistry of the bard, now poured onto parchment, begin to settle, congeal, harden. Our Bible is fundamentally different than the sacred texts of many other religious traditions. The Quran, the sacred text of Islam, is a series of speeches, some mighty long speeches. The sutras of Buddhism are discourses. There are short discourses and medium discourses and really long discourses. By contrast, the Bible of Judaism and the New Testament of Christianity are largely, even relentlessly, story. And even the non-story parts, the begats, the lists of laws, the proverbs, the psalms, in the end, even the non-story parts are in the service of story. Of the story of what it means for us to be alive. What it is to subdue the ever-encroaching chaos. What it is to make meaning of these lives we are given. Even as we undertake to procure food, find shelter, rear children, defend ourselves from all attacks. It's a story of what it is to make meaning. And the special burden of our holy texts to address what it means to do all these things, to live these lives in relation to some other, some ultimate, something more than us, more than now. Let me ask by a show of hands, how many of you have a Bible at home? How many of you have more than one Bible at home? Turns out, in a recent survey, the vast majority of Americans, Christian and otherwise, close to 90% of American households have at least one Bible. Many have 4. And even the majority of those who describe themselves as hostile to the Bible or skeptical of the Bible, even they have one. Not only is the Bible the best-selling book of all time, remarkably, the Bible is the best-selling book of the year after year after year after year. But let's put it differently. Nearly 90% of all American households have at least one Bible, many have 4, which means this: Bible publishers manage to sell some 25 million Bibles a year of a book that almost everyone already has. Now, millennials and Gen Xers are the least likely to have Bibles, but even then, 82% of millennials and 86% of Gen Xers. Boomers, my generation, we're 90% of us have Bibles, and elders, 93% of Americans who are in the elders category have Bibles. 95% of African American households have Bibles, while whites, 87%, and Hispanics, 88%. Now, nearly 90% of Americans own Bibles, but only half of Americans are, by the same person who did the survey, Bible users. And here's the definition of a Bible user. That is, they engage with the Bible by reading or listening to it, and it doesn't count here on church. They engage with the Bible by reading, listening to, or praying with the Bible on their own at least 3 to 4 times a year. How many of you have a family Bible, what's called a family Bible at home? Much fewer. I do think that is going down a little bit. A family Bible is a Bible handed down through the family with each successive generation recording the family's history inside the book. Births, deaths, baptisms, confirmations, marriages, and also stuffing it with important photographs or news clippings. And utilizing a family Bible, the family is proclaiming, in a sense, their place, their own place in the parade of God's people across the generations. I've brought a few of this church's family Bibles here today. They're on the communion table for those who can see them, and I'll meet here after worship to share them with anybody who wants to. A Danish Bible that belonged to Samuel Sewell, printed in 1695. Mount Vernon Congregational Church's Pulpit Bible, or Lectern Bible, published in 1871. And my favorite, the largest one here, the Bible presented by Sir Francis Wilkes to the newly built Old South Meeting House, printed in 1716. It's the Bible that Samuel Adams and Phyllis Wheatley would have heard read from the pulpit of our meeting house. The Christian Bible is a big book, and it's kind of a messy book. It's even argumentative, even within itself. One author avers in no uncertain terms that God is love. And another author describes a fierce, even a ferocious God, God as a consuming fire, or God as a leopard running down its prey. And speaking of argumentative, did you know that those who in our Bible are designated friends of God have this in common? They are the ones most likely to argue with God. Abraham and God argued back and forth like an old married couple, while Job yelled at God and railed at God, and Abraham and Job bear the distinct honor of being called friends of God. Our Bible is big and messy, and it's not streamlined. There was a guy back in the 2nd century, a guy named Tatian, a Syrian Christian writer and theologian. Tatian noticed that the New Testament isn't streamlined. That is, he was bothered by the fact that we have 4 distinct Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they don't tell quite the same story about Jesus. So Tatian had the idea of streamlining these 4 Gospels, harmonizing them, eradicating the messiness, sort of smoothing them out, getting rid of the unruliness. So he took Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and he kind of mushed them together, fused them into one glob. However, in the end, what Tatian achieved wasn't all that harmonious. In the end, instead of 4 marvelous, sharp, distinct portraits of Jesus, we got one really blurry one that didn't make any sense. And at the end of the day, the church rejected Tatian's efforts and settled on living with the richness and sometimes the contradictions and the messiness of the 4, rather than streamlining the 4 into one. But here's the thing about our Bible. Throughout the stories of the Bible, from the garden in Genesis to the golden city of the book of Revelation, throughout the whole long, winding, tangled 60-some odd books with all its characters, with Noah in his shame and drunkenness, Moses with his lisp or stutter, Paul with his thorn in the flesh, Mary with her song, Ruth with Naomi. Here's the thing, all the characters, they're looking up. They're all looking up, squinting hard, straining to gain a glimpse of the great thrumming mystery at the heart of it all, aware that they are responsible to and in relationship with something other, bigger, higher, more. We observe them all looking up, proclaiming with that upward gulp that this business of living, this business of being alive, of pilgrimage and journey, and the business of dying, to which we will all get around, that it's not just between and among us. There's a higher law. There's a being who defies time and space, by whom we are all related, by whose design we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers, or should be, by whose design justice matters on this earth, by whose design forgiveness is the highest if also the hardest of the virtues. In the world of the big, messy book of the Bible, at the end of the day, it isn't riches that matter or power, but goodness and mercy, which makes our Bible one very special book. The Bible and the people of the Bible, Abraham and Sarah, Samson and Delilah, Martha and Mary, Priscilla and Aquila, Cain and Abel, either because or lots of times despite themselves, they call the rest of us to account. They call us to live to and by the divine plumb line by which our lives are measured. The Bible and its characters, its people, its heroes and its villains shout above all the world's wars and all the world's greed and all the world's walls that we matter to each other because we matter to God. This old, messy book shouts that the earth matters, creation matters, the heaving, warming, convulsing, rebelling earth matters. The white rhino and the right whale, the polar bear and the koala bear, these matter. They have to matter to us because these matter to God. Now, if you've worshiped with us at Old South Church, you probably know that we take this old, difficult book pretty seriously. We read it together in worship, we break it open, we dissect and inspect it in sermons, we take a magnifying glass to it in Bible study. We like to say at this church that we take this Bible so seriously, we wouldn't dare read it literally. Your clergy have spent not a little time and not a little money learning about this big old book. We are interested in what its authors say, both on the face of it, but also with understandings informed by archaeology and anthropology, textual criticism and source criticism, language, gender studies, and more. We take this book so seriously, in part because it is a potent book, as sharp as any two-edged sword. In the wrong hands, this book can kill. In the hands of the KKK, in the hands of the Christian identity movement, in the hands of white supremacists in Charlottesville, it has murdered. But in the right hands, this book is life and blessing. In the right hands, it has freed the enslaved, healed the broken, welcomed the refugee, befriended the leper. We take it so seriously because there is so very much at stake here, because 90% of American households have it and think it says this or that. So church, Old South, blessed are those who read aloud the words, even words like harlotry. You know, because it's raining today, you have nothing else to do this afternoon, read the book of Hosea and understand why that word is introduced to catch our attention. Blessed are those who read aloud the words, even words like harlotry, and words like vanity, and words like exile, and words like vision. Blessed are they who read aloud such words, and blessed are those who hear, and blessed are those who keep what is written therein. Amen.